It's a very special place. I grew up after the Korean War. We lived in Jeollado. There were nobody my age, and I was very happy in the village. Korea has always been home, and I learned the concept of Jeong. You can't translate it. It's impossible. It's some affection or love Korean style.
Heading the International Healthcare Clinic at one of Korea's top university hospitals is John Linton, the first foreigner to earn a medical license in Korea. But John Linton, or Ihn Yohan, as he is known here, has a much deeper relationship with Korea, one that goes back 4 generations. It starts in 1895, when his great-grandfather landed in a tiny, unknown country called Korea as a missionary, and was carried on by a grandfather that joined Korea's liberation movement against the Japanese occupation, and a father who fought alongside Korean soldiers during the Korean War. Our globalist today is Ihn Yohan to talk about his family's love for Korea and how he is carrying on that tradition. So, welcome, John, to the Globalists.
Thank you for inviting me to your program.
We've been friends for a long time, but researching this program, I didn't know that you were Korea's first special naturalized Korean, and that was because it had something to do with an ambulance?
Actually, not exactly with the ambulance, but in 2012. There was a lot of nervousness about giving dual citizenship legally. And in the Im government, I was the first one to get what they call in Korean 특별귀화, which is specialized. The concept is if you've lost your Korean citizenship and have contributed greatly, you should be rewarded by getting it back easily. Or if your ancestors are patriots. Well, my grandfather's a patriot, but I didn't use that. I received an award for doing humanitarian aid in North Korea. But they were greatly relieved that there was no criticism of the dual citizenship, because at first they were worried that it was not going to go over well.
And especially because you were the first one in this case.
Exactly.
It had nothing to do with an ambulance?
Well, my father was killed in an automobile accident in 1984, many years ago.
Yeah.
And after residency and coming back, I came through Texas, and my uncle is head of EMS in 3 counties. I want to be very careful what I say, but Koreans are very smart. And it angered me that they're so smart, but the ambulance and the ambulance system is so backward. And some money was appropriated by my father's friends, and I built an ambulance in my backyard. And then we were going to give it to the fire department, and we said, wait a minute, before we give it to them, we should give them some training. So in 1993, 30 years ago, my uncle flew over with a paramedic team, and they taught Korea's first EMS.
Oh, wow.
And we donated the ambulance at the end of the training. And that became a model for the entire country. So if you want to be successful, get in front of a crowd and run, because it was going to happen anyway. Korea has developed so quickly. There are some blank spaces of things that didn't follow the curve upward.
And in 1993, that was the emergency,
Right.
The ambulance system.
Not only that, but the fact that you can do CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, inside the ambulance, and you can intubate. Regrettably, the ambulances now have gotten smaller. Again, we corrected all of that.
Yeah.
At one point, there were 5,000 of my design on the road.
But, you know, your ambulance contribution aside, even your North Korean assistance aside, the first part in terms of your ancestors, it almost seems that that alone should have granted you the #1 cis. Talk about your great-grandfather, right?
My great-grandfather came in 1895.
1895.
He came, the original Underwood, I should say, was visiting the South and said, we need missionaries in Korea. So he came to Korea, and they divided the country, northern and southern Presbyterian. So our ancestors ended up in the most difficult 전라도, Honam.
Yeah.
And my grandmother was born in Mokpo in 1899. My father was born in Kunsan in 1926.
When you're talking, the time that you're talking about, Korea was a small country, so.
I think one of the greatest contributions, there are many things that happened, but within the schools and in women education, because they not only opened boys' schools, but they opened 소학교 for ladies.
Yeah.
And for middle school and high school. And so they started the education of Korean women on a large scale,
Yeah.
which was quite impressive and a good thing.
I think, you know, the story about missionaries and especially education as a whole, we talked about the Underwood family, who's also responsible for the Yonsei University, which is one of the top universities in Korea. But women's education is also a big thing. But, you know, 1895, were there stories that is passed down from your family about what they found when they were here?
I have 308 letters that Eugene Bell, my grandmother's father, sent back to his mother.
Oh, wow.
So it tells you everything. And one example is he keeps mentioning Jason Saw. And I said, who is Jason Saw? Jason Saw. My good friend Jason Saw. I bought a typewriter from Jason Saw. And that's Sojepil. So Korea was a much smaller place.
And who is Sojepil? You know, not all of our listeners will know who Sojepil is.
Well, he was a reformer.
Yes. Well, not our reformer, the reformer, really. Pretty much.
First doctor.
Yeah.
A Western trained doctor. But apparently a very nice and, you know, a very good man. The comments are very endearing that he makes about Jason Saw. I was quite shocked to realize that Jason Saw was Sojepil.
Yeah. Your ancestors were very crucial part of really the birth of Korean government, a country called Korea. They were not just, you know, doing medicine, helping out the poor in small countries. They were really a part of what this country was going to be.
But I think we should also look at the Korean side, because they ended up in 전라도, and they were well received. He ended up in Mokpo and then in Gwangju, where he started 2 schools in Mokpo, 2 schools in Gwangju. But I want to point out very strongly that these, if you look at all their writings, they were well received. The people of 전라도, the people of Honam were ready to change. They were ready for the change, and they welcoming what the missionaries offered, especially in modern education. And I think that's often overlooked, that in many countries where missionaries or Peace Corps or wherever people go for humanitarian reasons, they're not always accepted. And also, if you look into O.R. Avison's memoirs from 130 years ago, these Korean young men are very smart. They're very talented. If given the opportunity, they may be better than us. This is what he writes 130 years ago. So there was a recognition that there was talent there was openness there was brilliance there. And we're missionaries are not going to solve this problem. We need to train Korean doctors for Korean health care. The success was they weren't looking at their own work, but they were looking way beyond.
Yeah.
We've got to train Korean talent
all throughout, I mean, you're the fourth generation of missionaries. You stayed. You never left. Why?
Well, my brother used to say, of our family even, I'm very different from the other America or Western oriented. We lived in Chalado. There were nobody my age. So Johnny jumped over the mission wall and never came back.
Okay.
That's a sort of a poetic. In other words, I grew up in the village. There were thatch roofs and mud huts. And I was very happy in the village. And Korea's always been home. And I learned the concept of Jeong. You can't translate it. It's impossible. It's some affection or love Korean style. And then I'm very unlike my family members who donated to Korea. I was on the receiving end. I had the special privilege of going to Yonsei University. 정원회 입학. You know, I was picked out of the quota.
One of the top universities in Korea, and you got a way in.
If it wasn't for Yonsei and love of Koreans, I wouldn't be a doctor. Would have never had this career. And then in 1991, I came back from residency training in New York and became the youngest, director. I've been there 32 years.
Yeah, I heard.
That's very special.
Yeah.
That's special treatment. And then as you mentioned earlier, the special dual citizenship thing. So always in my mind, I'm thinking, how can I repay back the Korean people in Korea, which have given me so much? And the ambulance is one thing. Going to North Korea and eradicating tuberculosis was another thing. And now medical tourism.
Yeah.
And bringing patients to Korea for treatment.
Yeah. Something that only a family of like yours that have really planted their roots here and have stayed for generations here know about Korea that no one else would. Visiting Korea, someone who loves BTS wouldn't quite understand.
My grandmother was born in 1899, and she grew up when Korea was very poor, very wanting, in great need. My father was born in the Japanese occupation, and he grew up and saw the horrible oppression of the Japanese. I think those were cementing factors in their love for Korea. I grew up after the Korean War in Suncheon. Things were tough. I mean, it was not an easy place to live. I mean, just eating was difficult, getting enough food. It's unimaginable today. I mean, now to go to a mud hut and a thatched roof, you have to go to a folk village. But Korean people were very challenged after the war. Korea picked itself from the ashes. And I watched all of that during my life, all the unbelievable progress that the whole world in the last 50 years has changed more than it's ever changed anywhere. Korea's #1. Is a front runner of that. Now, it's not all good. I miss the warm, hot floor in the wintertime.
Oh, I know you could talk a whole 30 minutes about ondol.
That's right.
The hot
That's
floor.
right. We learned a lot of facts, 지식, We learned wisdom, and we learned morality on the ondolbang, on the hot floor. So you're making me reminiscent back to my childhood. I'm sorry.
But in a way, it's sort of, I guess, in a way, the fast change and the progress that has been made, you and your family were a part of it, and so maybe that is...
A very small part, I mean.
Still, I think important.
한국에 특히 전라도에서 사랑을 많이 받고 성장을 했는데 주는 것보다 받은 것이 좀 많은 것 같고 또 어느 나라 국민이 되겠냐 하고 선택권을 준다면은 제일 환영할 나라가 한국입니다.
Okay, so we want to know a little bit even more about now you, Ihn Yohan, John Linton. You have dual citizenship. Are you Korean or are you American?
I consider, Americans are very, I'll give an example. Americans are very preoccupied about rules. I think relationships are much more important. So in that sense, I'm totally Korean. But I found some commonality too. In the deep South, where my ancestors came from, honor was a very important thing. Honor. Don't mess with my honor. In 전라도, 체면, 내 체면 건들지 마, my face, leave my face alone. A couple of years ago, at this late age, after I became over 60, I suddenly realized that honor and face are the same thing. They're identical. So, yes, I am much more Korean than I am American or Western. But there are some, shall we say, values in Western education that I do cherish. You're taught justice and truth and things like that. But if you look deep into Korean culture, they're also there. I mean, it's not like Korea is lacking. It's just honor and face are very different words, but they mean the same thing.
Yeah. Well, different words meaning the same thing, it can almost sort of apply to you. I mean, you are sort of a very complicated, not the normal Korean by any standards. And when you speak Korean, although it's become soulized a lot, you speak with like a totally Suncheon accent.
A total Suncheon country bumpkin.
You call Suncheon the center of the universe.
That's
우주의
right.
중심.
Right.
Why do you love Suncheon so much?
Well, it's hometown. John Denver's song, I should have been home yesterday. When I go there, I think that every time, that I should quickly retire and go home and spend time with my childhood friends. It's a very special place. Also, religiously speaking, the greatest martyr in the history of the world, Ihn Yohan. Ihn Yohan is sort of my hero, my mentor. And he happened to, the main place of he was actually from Gyeongsangdo, but he came to 전라도. So I joke that Suncheon is the center of the universe because it's my hometown. But actually, philosophically, it's the center of my greatest mentor, Ihn Yohan.
북한을 많이 다녔는데 결핵 때문에 굉장히 고생하고 있습니다, 북한 사람들이.
But North Korea is also close to your heart as well.
Well, in 1997, I crossed what we call the Yalu River, which is Amnokgang. And from Tandong, I rode a train over to Siniju. And I saw the kids building a fire in a barrel. And I looked out the window, and it was once upon a time in Suncheon.
Yeah.
Not once upon a time in America, but once upon a time in Suncheon.
You saw your childhood.
And I said, my gosh, there's two Koreas. Why are there two Koreas? Doesn't seem right. I mean, it should be that the two Koreas should be one Korea. And it was really thought-provoking. My curiosity just went totally to the ceiling. Because here's this country that is, hasn't developed like us and has a different system, but they're Koreans. And I was quite fascinated. And then when I saw their hunger and their need, their medical needs, then, my gosh, we got to do something about this. After the place unifies, I don't want a North Korean coming and saying, we were hurting so bad and you didn't help us and you were so wealthy. Wonmang, what's the word? Disappointment.
Yeah.
Because, after unification, these people are going to be very, very unhappy.
Yeah.
And we're going to feel an enormous amount of guilt.
So they sort of, where were you when this was happening?
Exactly. Where were you when we went through what they call the arduous march. And even now, things are not a whole lot better. So even today.
How many years have you continued your medical assistance to North Korea?
Since COVID, it's all shut down recently, but with different NGOs, starting with Eugene Bell Foundation, started by my brother. I traveled 29 times. And I think what's important is we weren't concentrated in Pyongyang as much as the provinces and the countryside. And you know, I'm a country boy, so country boy to country boy, talking to country people in North Korea, it made it very easy to communicate. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about you know, different countries outside, but about farming, family, medicine. Those are all topics that you can freely discuss.
And because of your Korean also, I mean, there's no language barrier.
They enjoyed my dialect, from 전라도 dialect.
Did they understand it? I mean, it's Korean, but it's very strong.
형님을 성님이라고 그러고 또 더 나가면 행님입니다. 행님. 행님 어느 오시오? 가더라고.
Sometimes we have to ask, you know, what do you mean by that, you know? But they're quite entertained, and also I'm very curious about their different. But it's, you know, the ondol floor, the way they live, the extended family, how you treat elderly people, it's all the same.
Yeah.
And that to me was an opportunity, a God-given opportunity that you can't pass by. You know what I'll tell you what my end game is.
Okay, end game.
What I would like to do is retire and go to North Korean hospitals and repair medical equipment.
Oh.
If I had that privilege or permission, I think that would be my greatest contribution. It's a lot of broken equipment and getting spare parts. I went to an operating room in Kwaksan, a very small TB hospital, and they had Siemens.
Yeah.
They were all burned out, all the lights, and I brought one back, and they couldn't find the model, it was too old. So they blew new, South Korean technicians blew new
light bulbs.
And the joy of going and putting these light bulbs in the socket and watching them come on was ecstatic. It was beyond the fact that they were all burned out, and then you come back and you plug in the right equipment and it works.
And literally turn the lights back on.
And the lights come back on. I also at one point was very arrogant. We were going up with 4 X-ray vehicles, you know, maybe $2 million worth of stuff. You know, I thought I had so much to offer, but after going into 4 different provinces, it was such a small contribution. And then it hit me that this is not a county or a province. This is a whole country that has great needs. And that what we're doing, I picked up a stone and threw it in the Hamung Ocean, and I told the guide, this is my contribution. It's just like this little stone.
Little pebble.
Yeah, and he turned, and he looked at me, and he says, Chosun people, which is Korean, Chosun people appreciate you helping one person. And it was absolutely mind-boggling. Here he is comforting me because I made the realization, and I came down from this high pedestal and came down to reality that what we're helping is so minuscule. And he was giving me comfort. That's Korean. That's very Korean. That's not communist or democratic or, you know, that's just Korean.
That's you. You're Korean in a way. A lot to think about. Thank you, John.
It's been a great pleasure being here with you.
It has been our pleasure as well. And that's it for me. I'll be back next week with another globalist who is putting Korea on the map. Suncheon out.